Sometimes we celebrate the war dead, sometimes we honor the war dead, but these days we, that is to say those Canadians who deeply care about those soldiers who made the supreme sacrifice, are increasingly finding ourselves in a position in which we must defend the war dead, at least when it comes to the left wing's lunatic fringe. It's a perverse scenario, yet in recent years, cultural vandals have engaged in all manners of ideological warfare, from the war on Christmas to the war on fill in your favorite holiday here. And disturbingly, a new target has emerged in the crosshairs of these malcontents: Remembrance Day. The progressive foot soldiers of this war are armed with naivety and self-loathing, and they wear their ignorance like a badge of honor. Examples abound. Some have taken to wearing white poppies. Not only do these people misappropriate a semi-sacred symbol, but they mock what it stands for, claiming there can be no such thing as a just war, that all conflict is bad. If the greatest generation subscribed to that way of thinking some 75 years ago, most of Europe would be conversing in German today. In this regard, it's fitting those so-called alternative poppies are white, the same color as the flag of surrender. Then there are those who simply can't be bothered to wear any sort of poppy due to warped New Age ideology blended with good old-fashioned ingratitude. These critics scoff at November 11th, interpreting Remembrance Day as being a day in which militarism is glorified. They believe that if we could all just sit cross-legged in a healing circle and talk things out, conflict would be a thing of the past, but there's no tangible benefit in flower power when it comes to dealing with tyrants and terrorists whose stock in trade is invasion or genocide. Many poppy bashers seem to think that wearing a poppy is akin to pledging allegiance to the industrial military complex. In their vacuous view, old soldiers aren't fading away fast enough. To them, a veteran isn't someone who secured freedom. Rather, that old relic with a chest full of medals is merely a former paid assassin. Such thinking isn't merely wrong or offensive. It's downright vulgar. Indeed, when I think of the lunatic fringe that chooses not to respectfully remember Remembrance Day, I think of my late grandfather, who sacrificed 5 years of his life fighting in the Second World War. In the 1960s, I was a kid who grew up reading war comics and watching after-school reruns of the Rat Patrol, and I used to deeply resent the fact that my grandfather was so damn miserly when it came to sharing stories about his real-life wartime exploits in Egypt and Italy. "Come on, tell me a war story, Pop," I'd plead in vain. I wanted to hear about machine guns blazing and grenades exploding and bad guys being blown to smithereens, and upon each request, my grandfather would shrug, saying he really didn't have any good wartime yarns to tell. I reckon this to be a crock because I had once stumbled upon a small, nondescript cardboard box in the linen closet that contained my grandfather's medals. And darn it, he sure didn't earn those medals by making hot chocolate. So what gives? Amazingly, my friends told me that their grandfathers were also unforthcoming with tales of wartime heroics too. It was baffling. After all, comic book publishers and Hollywood made war look so cool. Why wouldn't our grandfathers open up and share their stories? In fact, all I can ever remember my grandfather saying about the war were two anecdotes. One, in his estimation, Sikhs were by far the very best soldiers on the planet. He told me that Sikh soldiers he came in contact with were absolutely fearless warriors who embraced the proviso of death before dishonor. He saw many of them die on the battlefield in what were essentially suicide missions, and yet not a single one of these soldiers ever questioned his orders or deserted his unit. Even though their loyalty came with an enormous price tag, there was still something so very endearing about men embracing such dedication to duty. The second story was anything but a military conquest steeped in glory. Rather, it centered on a stupid, deadly accident. Marching in the Sahara, my grandfather's unit noticed a low-flying American bomber aircraft passing overhead. The soldiers began to wave at their ally in the sky, but much to their horror, the plane's bomb bay doors creaked open and ordnance plummeted to earth. The soldiers made a run for cover, and when the dust settled, a sergeant, who my grandfather described as very short and very unpleasant, had a piece of shrapnel lodged firmly in his helmet. He had died instantly. Although the sergeant was a highly unlikable individual, my grandfather nevertheless always seemed bothered that a man could perish in such a completely senseless way. It was after my grandfather died years later that I began to comprehend his aversion to reciting war stories. Despite what Hollywood would have you believe, war is seldom glorious. Rather, it's very messy. It's a very deadly kind of business, one in which only the Grim Reaper benefits. I don't think the New Age peaceniks would ever be able to understand my grandfather and his ilk, men who went to war not because they wanted to, but because they had to. What the anti-poppy crowd doesn't get is that the biggest advocates for peace are indeed war veterans. They experience firsthand the horror that is war and fully know war is only undertaken when all else fails. Our soldiers gave so much, we have benefited so much. Is it really too much to ask that on November 11th we don a little crimson flower to honor these giants before they fade away forever? For the Rebel.Media, I'm David the Menzoid Menzies.